All right, welcome back. Hopefully those readings in that video kind of captured some of your imagination, fascination, and hope that you picked up the relationship of God, Torah, and Israel, right? You have God up at the top, Yahweh, and you can see it written in Hebrew. And he has a hierarchical relationship, right, where he is above both Israel, the land, and Israel, the people, who also have a lateral relationship with each other. And all of this is defined by the Torah. And so keep these three foundational aspects of Judaism in mind as we go through this following month. And so by now you should have the first two sections of our Judaism Day One assignment done, the synagogue hostages, and then that intro to Judaism assignment. Right now, I'm going to give a kind of quick lecture about the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and you're going to watch a Religious for Breakfast video. And for this, you just need to write 4 sentences on how these videos added to, changed, or reinforce your understanding of Judaism. And you might want to take some notes while you're doing this, just so you have an idea of what you're learning about, and you don't have to watch this video more than once. So I think there's value at looking at the Roman occupation of Jerusalem and all of Judea through a colonialism lens, a colonialistic lens, if you will. And so you can see Judea all the way down here, right next to Arabia, and the kind of a small southeastern territory of the vast Roman Empire. So it wasn't always part of Rome, but at about 63 BCE, before Common Era, Pompey conquered Jerusalem. And from that point on, they were controlled by the Romans. It was an occupied state. About 23 years after that, Herod is named the client king of Judea by the Roman Senate. You might have heard of King Herod or Herod the Great. And then about 100 years after that, for a number of different reasons, the Jewish rebellion begins in 66 Common Era. And at first, the rebellion is pretty successful. The Jews are able to push most of the Roman presence outside of Jerusalem. And about 4 years later, Jerusalem sieged and destroyed by the Romans. But you can see this period of 140 years of Roman-controlled Judea is pretty significant for a number of reasons. Not only for the Jewish traditions, but also the Christian traditions we'll talk about in a month from now. So let me go to Schoology and take you through some of these resources. So here you have a drawing of what the temple looked like from the time of Herod until the time that Romans sieged the city. And so a couple things I'd like to point out. First, you have the Antonia Fortress, which is where the Roman governor would stay. And so he could literally watch over the capital of Judea. And this arrangement kind of shows how, in some ways, the Jewish people were given some freedom and some sovereignty, religion, culture, political life, and in other ways, they were heavily watched over. You have the Sanhedrin, this kind of autonomous court. And then you have the Holy Temple inside here. And within each layer, it becomes more and more exclusive. So here you have the court of the Gentiles, and this is where non-Jewish people could go. This is about as far as they could go. Then you have the court of the Israelites, the court of women. As you get closer and closer, you get to the court of priests, where only the official priests could be there. And then finally, you have the Holy of Holies, the place which believe that God emanates from, the holiest place, where really the high priest in Jerusalem is the only one who could go in there, and he has to be ritually pure, and it can only happen on certain times. So a very, very sacred site. But if you went there now, it would look like this. Because of course, in 70 CE, the Romans sieged Jerusalem, and they tore down almost the entire temple, leaving just a piece of the western wall, which is right around here. And so now you see Jerusalem as a cosmopolitan, diverse city, where you have the Dome of the Rock, you have the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and so you have both Jewish and Muslim representation, and in fact some Christian representation here on the Temple Mount. Now interestingly enough, if you went to Israel right now and you went to the Temple Mount, you would see this sign saying, according to the Torah, it is forbidden for any person to enter the area of the Temple Mount due to its sacredness. And this came from the chief rabbinate of Israel, so kind of like the head rabbi in Israel. And this is in the late 60s. And there's a couple of interpretations why. One of them being that while there's some certainty, there's not full certainty of where this Holy of Holies is. And so it could have been anywhere in this part. And so if you're not supposed to go there, if that's the most sacred site, and only the high priest of Israel or of Jerusalem could go in there, then you can't go in anywhere in the Temple Mount. Though there are some other, cultural, political theories that are out there for this. Now, despite this, right, there's internal diversity, and there are plenty of Jewish people who will go up to the Temple Mount and not just stay outside the Western Wall. So like with all groups of people, sometimes you have a split between what the authority says to do or not to do and what the actual people do or don't do. Now there's some interesting videos from when the prospect teacher went there. I suggest that everyone watches this What is this Western Wall video. It's just a few minutes, does a great job. And then there's 2 devotional videos made by 2 Jewish groups that go into the destruction of the first temple and the second temple. Now before you guys go and watch that Religion for Breakfast video, I want to take through a couple things. Right, so I mentioned how in 70 CE the Romans took back Jerusalem and they destroyed the second temple, leaving only the Western Wall. And so the destruction of this second temple, among other things, is mourned during the fast of Tisha B'Av, and you guys are going to watch a short video to finish about this. In situated perspective, right, while Jews were mourning this, Rome was celebrating this. You may have seen the Arch of Titus, and that was erected because he sieged Jerusalem and took it back. And this became one of the main impetuses for Jewish people to leave Judea and scatter the diaspora around Europe. But before we leave Jerusalem, I think there's an interesting thing here, and that's the Sicarii. So Josephus is probably the most famous, most trusted historian of this time. He was Jewish, and then from my understanding of it, he then kind of switched sides to the Romans. And one of the things that he documented were some of the groups that maintained active resistance against the Roman government. And you have a couple groups, the Zealots probably being the most infamous, but I want to talk a little bit about the Sicarii. As you can see here, their name derived from the Latin word sica, which meant curved dagger, which was this curved dagger they would hide in their cloaks. And so they would go to people, just in broad daylight, especially at religious festivals when Jerusalem was packed, and they would go and they would stab someone, and they'd be able to hide their murder weapon in their clothes and just get away. And no one really could see what happened. It would just happen so fast, and it would be so crowded that people couldn't tell what happened. The weapon was well hidden. So we see kind of ancient terrorism here because they were trying to disrupt this Roman government of Judea. Not only would they attack Romans, but they would attack Jewish people who they thought were being faithful to the Romans. And a little bit of etymology. So Josephus used the word Sicarii, or at least he used a Greek version of that form, suggesting that he was adopting a term that was already used by the Roman forces, because he typically would use a word lestai, which typically means bandit, but is often used to describe Jewish resistance fighters. In a month when we talk about Jesus and his crucifixion, I want you to keep in mind this word lestai, which could mean bandit, could mean resistance fighters, because there's controversy over that term still today. But speaking of terms, what modern term derives from Sicarii? As I kept saying it over and over again, were you reminded of any term? You may have heard of the term Sicario, which is a hitman in a Mexican cartel, even Latin American cartels. I believe the term actually originated in Colombia and then was co-opted by Mexican cartels. Here you see some sicarios from one of the more violent cartels at the moment right now, the Jalisco New Generation. And in fact, there's a lot of religion and religious references in the world of El Narco. You have the saint of narcos, especially in Michoacan. Both the cartels La Familia and the Knights Templar have a lot of religious theology and symbolism and motivation to their actions. You can see the leader of La Familia there on the left, and then you can see a very famous symbol, Santa Muerte, on the right. And there's some Old Testament things here, but this is mostly a Christian thing, so we won't dive too deep into this. I just thought it was interesting to go from Sicarii to Sicario. And while we were at Sicario, I figured I'd drop in some of the religious references I've been learning about in cartels. So now, take the time to watch this video. Honestly, this Religious for Breakfast channel is one of the best religious YouTube channels out there, and I can't recommend his videos enough. So you're gonna watch that, and then based on this video and that Religious Breakfast video, you're gonna write 4 more sentences on how these videos added to, changed, or reinforced your understanding of Judaism. Then you're gonna watch the video on Tisha B'Av, and in 5 or more sentences, I want you to connect that short video to either the siege of Jerusalem or to connect it to the synagogue hostage situation from the beginning of class. Once you're done with that, you're good in my book, and you just need to make sure this is submitted to Schoology before class on Friday. and I hope to see you then. Bye.